Welcome to the OddsBreakers, number one place for shared, sharp betting information.
Welcome back to podcast 55 of 2021. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can follow me on Twitter at OBKiev. Follow us to the OddsBreakers. Follow us on social media / the OddsBreakers. This episode is being brought to you by MyBookie.ag. For a 100% sign-up bonus, please visit MyBookie and use the promo code The OddsBreakers. Terms, conditions, and location apply. If you'd like to help us out with our costs, become a premium subscriber, please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and you can pick any premium handicappers to support the OddsBreakers as well as get their premium plays. If you'd like to just support theoddsbreakers.com and get the podcast a little bit early, as well as some merchandise throughout the year, you can become a patron for just $10 a month. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. My friends, we had a great weekend of sports. Football, 6-5 in the preseason. Not terrible. Had some buybacks trying to middle. That didn't happen. But we were up in football a little bit. We were up in baseball a little bit. And we were up in the UFC a really good amount. The UFC has actually been probably my best sport personally as a handicapper. I just ran the numbers since I was able to start following my plays on the UFC. Now, there's not a lot of tracking sites for the UFC, so it's a little bit more difficult. But since about almost 2 years ago, not quite, we are 82, 74, and 5 up 34 units. So that's not too bad. 34 units with that amount of plays. I play prop bets, plus money prop bets, and just plus money plays in general more often than I do juiced plays. I would say it's probably 66 to 33, 34 or something. That's why the percentage is low, but as long as the units are high, that's what people care about. 4-1 last week in the UFC. NFL coming around the corner. We have a great show for you today. I'm going to cover the early preseason lines, talking about a little bit about every single game, except for a couple games that we might have a premium play on. But otherwise, we're going to touch on every single game, give you some leans. Some of these might even become plays for me later in the week. So, going to do that. Going to talk a little bit of fantasy football with our guy D Nasty. He's coming back on, and we're going to talk about draft strategy and any player rankings that has been changed. I think draft strategy is important. I know everybody's drafts are right around the corner. No better time to think about what you're going to do for your fantasy football season. I have my fantasy rankings posted up at theoddsbreakers.com. You can just click on bets, info, and trends, and you can find them. You can also get a few other articles about coaches' preseason records. You're going to want to look at that for the final week of preseason. You can also find out how to make a sports guaranteed profit from a free bet play that they give you. There's an article on that. And of course, check out our Intro to Sports Betting 101 that covers a ton about betting football, numbers, situations, and everything if you want to learn about how the pros bet in this industry. If you are a professional handicapper and want to benefit from the oddsbreakers.com and contribute to us, please tweet us at the OddsBreakers or visit us at the oddsbreakers.com. Would love to hear from you. All right, my friends, without further ado, let's get into some preseason NFL football. Final week, week 3, obviously used to be week 4. Starting out with the Indianapolis Colts against the Detroit Lions. I mean, Detroit looked bad in their preseason. Now you got a lot of news about the Colts, right? Wentz might be coming back. He's actually going to be practicing on a limited basis this week. Same with Quentin Nelson. So now I wonder if optimism is coming back a little bit on the Colts, but they still have backup quarterback issues, and that's why they're 3.5 point road chalk at Detroit. Now, the problem with Detroit, they look bad, and their second string and their third string look pretty bad too, and that's why they're not getting much love as far as from a betting standpoint. There's been people that lost on them, right? Detroit, Dan Campbell is 0-2, so one has to wonder if he really cares about the preseason. Well, not a ton of information on Frank Reich. He is 6-4 though, and his final week in the preseason, he's been 2-0. That's why you have 3 in the hook right there. I'm staying away from that one. Next one, you have the Philadelphia Eagles at the New York Jets. New York has been quite motivated. New coach Sal has been balling out there covering the spreads. Now he's a 4-point favorite against the Eagles, and the Eagles also looked quite incompetent under Sirianni there. Not sure how much Hurts is going to play. Don't know exactly. I'm going to be honest. I haven't watched a ton of Eagles. I do have it on replay, but I'm usually busy capping and doing other things. So I haven't gotten too much into Nick Sirianni, but he is 0-2 here. And just watching Joe Flacco play for this team last week was pretty bad. 10 for 17, an interception and a sack, 83 yards. And then Nick Mullins wasn't any better, 5 for 10, 1 interception and 3 sacks. These quarterbacks were horrible. I don't know how much Hurts you're going to see, but that's why you see them as decent-sized dogs here for a preseason game. Being that it's past the 3 and the Jets are already 2-0, not sure what they're going to do. I'm leaving this one alone myself. Next game. Pittsburgh is going to Carolina. And Pittsburgh is a +3 dog, highly juiced in most books, -120-ish is what I'm seeing. This one flipped. Right when it opened, the Steelers were favored, and now it went all the way to Carolina. I'm not sure why that is. Because Matt Rule hasn't really done much himself in the preseason, being 0-2. And, Mike Tomlin's kind of a preseason guy, it seems, lately. Now, his second and third weeks combined are 17-10 now. It was 16-10. And then his last week in preseason is 8-5. So I'm wondering why this flipped, and I'm not finding any information that it's going to be Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins as the second quarterback. I don't see Carolina putting Darnold out too long in this game because I think that Darnold is going to be their starter. I don't think they want to mess with that in the preseason so early when they invested, in him. They didn't get to draft an actual quarterback, right? So that's important. Now, Will Grier looked pretty good, 11 for 14. He played the most amount of snaps, and Walker was only 1 for 8. So I almost think that Will Grier pretty much won the backup role just in this game. But I don't think that they're going to play a ton of players themselves, and I think Tomlin's second, third string is a little bit better. So I'm going to play the Steelers and actually even get 3, and it's juiced anyway. But since I took a worse number at the +1 when it already moved, I recommend taking it right now at the 3 at the juice. I have no problem with you guys doing that. So that will be a play that we're making for sure.
Pay that man his money.
All right, next game is I have Minnesota versus Kansas City. Interesting game here. We actually already made a play on this game, so can't talk too much about it. But, if you look at the coaching numbers here, it gives you a little bit of a tell on which side we're going to go with. And it's important sometimes to look at what these coaches do at the end of their preseason weeks. Now, obviously, we don't have 4 weeks like we used to have, right? But there's still numbers on what these teams did their last preseason game, and that should help tell you what your thoughts should be coming into the season itself. Next game, Green Bay at Buffalo here. Buffalo is a pretty massive favorite at -7.5. Little shocking that this number is so big against Green Bay, but you know that Matt LaFleur, he pretty much told you he's not starting his starters most of these games, and I doubt he does this week. You might see a quarter of Rodgers, though. That's one thing I do wonder about. But Buffalo's looked amazing in the preseason. Their second string destroyed my Bears. And how embarrassing was it to see Mitch Trubisky come into Soldier Field and play his greatest game ever at Soldier Field?
Unreal.
Can I get like 2 more of those?
Unreal. Unreal.
I mean, he looked like a professional quarterback. A real, like, top 15 type quarterback. Couldn't believe it. He carved up the Bears, and their first string was in on defense. Well, at least most of them. There's a few missing, 3 or 4 players, but I still saw Khalil Mack. I saw Akeem Hicks. I've seen a lot of key role players that are in rotation. Jones, the linebacker. There's plenty of players there that got absolutely carved up by Mitch Trubisky, and that was freaking embarrassing. But at the same time, the Buffalo seemed really motivated that game for Mitch. I mean, they were blitzing Fields. Fields got popped, and they got a penalty for it. But you're doing blitzing the guy in the preseason. It's probably a good thing to prepare him for what he's about to see by doing that. But at the same time, glad he didn't get injured on that. He got popped bad on that blitz. So real quick, the Bills looking really good in the preseason. They look really motivated, but I would not be shocked if they just laid an egg this week too. Maybe the Packers look at Mitch and they say, hey, we don't want him doing that to us. Interesting spot, but I'll lean the Packers plus the 7.5 for now. And we'll see as time goes. But Sean McDermott is 3-1 the final week of the preseason. Next game, we have Baltimore versus Washington. I mean, Baltimore just wins. All Harbaugh does is win. People keep going against him. I'm actually a little bit of shock last week that Carolina didn't do anything against him. I thought that was a perfect opportunity to try to middle that. And I had the Ravens, but we went smaller on the middle and lost the middle part of it. But you can't bet against Harbaugh. It's -3.5. Really hard. And I know it's at Washington, and Rivera is 6-4 himself, but just not a ton of data on Rivera, and I don't know what he's going to do. So right now, I'm gonna lay off this. If this thing gets down to 3, probably take the Ravens. Next game, you have the Chicago Bears going against the Titans here, and the Bears look so bad that I don't even know what to do with this game because Vrabel doesn't even care about preseason in the past. Now this year, he has been winning in the preseason. So makes you wonder if he kind of did a philosophy change just all of a sudden before this season. Don't want to mess with Vrabel there. And at the same time, the Bears look so bad, you wonder if Dalton's going to just play a little bit more out of his mind here. I mean, Dalton, he looked bad. He didn't look like a starting quarterback. He didn't look like the guy that played with the Bengals 8-9 years ago that won 13 games. He wasn't even stepping up in the pocket. He was letting himself get smashed. And yes, our left tackle sucked and couldn't block. But at the same time, he didn't make anything good for himself by the way his footwork was. It was some very poor footwork by Dalton. And now you got more Bear fans screaming to start Fields. But like I said before, I don't want Justin Fields starting week 1 without a left tackle against Aaron Donald. That would be suicide. I mean, the Bears ruin quarterbacks. They ruin their confidence because they never have offensive lines. And when they draft a quarterback, he gets plowed so bad that he can't even have the confidence to complete a pass. I mean, that's happened to Mitch a little bit too. So don't put Fields in week 1 unless it's late in the second half is what I have to say. But anyways, getting back to this handicap, yeah, I mean, Titans just beat the Bucs 34-3. Next game, we have the Tampa Bay Bucs versus the Houston Texans. And I actually do have a premium play on this one, so I am not going to discuss it. Move on to the next one. Let's get pretty obvious here. The Saints versus the Cardinals. The Saints are playing before I'm even able to obviously release this podcast. They're going to play tonight, and it's only 1:46 p.m. during the day on Monday. So I am not going to have a big opinion on this game, but you really have two things to look at because there's not a lot of info on Cliff Kingsbury. You know, being that this is his third year of coaching, he's only got one full year of preseason, and he's 0-1 in week 4. And Sean Payton is 3-11 the final week. But what's going for the Saints is they're still figuring out their quarterback. So maybe it's a situation where, you know, Payton's going to motivate his quarterbacks to try to win that position. So that's the problem with this game and the handicap behind this game, in my opinion. Obviously, if you guys see something else about one of these games, please feel free to tweet us at the OddsBreakers. If it's valid, we'll share it for you. All right, the Rams at the Broncos. And this thing opened at 7 and it's up to 8.5. I mean, the Rams do not care about the preseason. They are not going to get Matt Stafford injured, and they are plus 8.5 point dogs. Denver's really motivated, really solidifying their team. They looked fantastic their last 2 games. Apparently, Vic Fangio is on a revenge tour this year, probably trying to save his job a little bit. But they had some really bad luck last year, and this year they've just been killing teams 30-3 against the Seahawks. Yeah, man, the Seahawks without Russell Wilson, that's not good. That's just bad. that is just so bad. But anyways, going back to this, no way I can fade the Broncos with what they're doing against a coach that doesn't care. I mean, if it got past the 10, I might have to think about it. Chargers versus the Seahawks. Chargers are plus 6 here, but here's the weird thing about the Seahawks. With their roster, Geno Smith, I believe, got a concussion. But the question is, why did this line move up so high on Seattle? -1 to -6. People probably expect maybe a little Russell Wilson play the first half. But if he doesn't, they're going to get smashed. And the Chargers didn't have a ton to prove either. They're probably going to be playing a lot of backups themselves. But right now, I have to lean the Chargers until I hear a little bit more about what's going on with Russell Wilson, because this line went up way too fast. Now, what I will say is that Pete Carroll has in the past been a very good preseason coach. I mean, he's last week, the week 4, he's 7-3. I mean, that's a pretty good number, right? But this year's just obviously seemed to be so much different because, you know, this year Pete Carroll is kind of getting beat. You know, he's getting beat up a lot, and his teams are looking terrible. 0-2 this year so far. So, you know, maybe there is motivation, but without a quarterback that's even halfway capable of doing something, I'm worried for this team. Next one we have is Jacksonville versus Dallas. Now, Jacksonville is playing against the Saints tonight, obviously. Don't have a ton to say yet. Now, this line on Sunday is Dallas +3. Dallas hasn't looked good. There's a lot of money that came in on Dallas last week. I'm glad that we only bet the first half at -2 because they lost that game outright. And Dallas has looked pretty bad in the preseason. But this is kind of dangerous because McCarthy, he hasn't really had a lot going on with this team. So you wonder if he's going to put up a big push here. He's 28-28 in the preseason, but he's 5-8 in the last week. So does he care about going 0-3 in the preseason? I don't know. You know, 5-8 shows he doesn't care too much in the last week. Maybe that's unless he didn't win a game. So he didn't win a game this year, and he's going against a new coach in Urban Meyer that's probably going to be a little bit motivated here, a little bit more motivated to try to win this game. And that's probably why you see Dallas as a dog at home against Jacksonville. So no play for me. I'll lean the dog slightly, Dallas. Let's move to Miami versus the Bengals, and not enough info on either of these teams. As you know, both coaches will probably play their starters a little bit in the first quarter, and they're probably going to see what they have the rest of the game. And that's why you only have a 2-point spread here for Miami. And that's just because Miami's a little bit better of a team in general, a little bit more depth at Miami. They're not going to, you're not going to see any Joe Burrow or anything like that. You might see some Tua. That's where the spread comes from at the -2. And just to let you know, all these totals, they range from 32 to 38. And that's a pretty small range because most of them are 34.5, 35.5, 36. Really, really hard to bet a total in the last week of preseason, in my opinion. The Raiders versus the 49ers. The Raiders are road dogs plus 3.5. This line moved from like pick'em to 3.5. I have no idea why that happened, and I did some searching around and still couldn't find a bunch of information that Peterman got cut or anything like that. But if you know anything about Chucky, he is a preseason nightmare. He is 7-2 his final week of preseason. John Gruden likes to win in the preseason. That's how he likes to get his season going. And Nate Peterman is a preseason god. But even if Peterman doesn't play a lot, their other two quarterbacks are fantastic. You have Carr, who is the starter. He might see some reps there. And then you have Mariota that might come back. He was injured a little bit last week, but he was able to walk through some practices. So I can see some decent quarterback play. Now, obviously, on the flip side of the coin, you got San Francisco, and they're still trying to work their new shiny rookie Trey Lance, and he played a lot of snaps last game. Just looking at the stats, Lance had 8 completions for 14 attempts. He had the most attempts. But at the same time, you still got Sudfeld there. And Jimmy G's going to play a little bit. But I don't think it's enough to overtake the Raiders by that spread. The Raiders are more motivated, in my opinion. Now, everyone's saying, yeah, the Raiders have some injuries, right? And they do. And so maybe the whole philosophy is the Raiders are going to rest their guys a little bit more. But at the same time, the 49ers hurt some people. They hurt Maurice Hurst. He's got a turf toe injury. No, it looks like actually a high ankle sprain. And Michael Kendricks has a turf toe injury. Some other injuries. Trey Sermon at running back is questionable. He's beat up a little bit. Trent Williams, offensive tackle, had his knee drained. That's never good. Jalen Hurd, a wide receiver. So the point is, the Niners were so injured last year, I can't see them keeping a lot of starters out for this game. I think the Raiders win this outright, personally, just the way Gruden is. And I'm going to take them for at least a few stars and probably sprinkle on that money line. Next game, we have the New England Patriots at the New York Giants. The Patriots look fantastic this year in preseason, right? They're destroying their competition. Who did they just shut out? The Eagles like 35-0, and they're 3.5 road chalk. Belichick's only 8-12 the final week of preseason. So this spread seems a little bit high, but the problem is Mac Jones is playing really well, it seems like, in the preseason, and you wonder if he's just going to have his last chance to fire out some more great passes. Joe Judge should be a little bit desperate here to show a win. That's why you're getting some juice here in most books at 3.5 -120. I'm going to watch this a little bit, but this Giants might be a decent look here for the last game of the preseason. just for the fact that Belichick doesn't do well that week, and the Giants need to show something this week. And finally, you have the Cleveland Browns laying road chalk of 5.5 points at the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, Atlanta's in the same situation here. Coach Arthur Smith is 0-2, brand new coach, and they look absolutely awful so far. Probably the worst looking preseason team out of anybody. While Cleveland's second string looks like they could start for a lot of different teams. So that's why you're seeing such a big spread here. But I'm almost wondering if Cleveland takes this opportunity to really find out who's making the team, all third string and fourth string. I mean, that's what I would do if I was Stefanski. We don't have enough data on Stefanski here. So going to have to lean with the ugly, dirty birds at the plus 5.5. So those are just my early thoughts, a couple quick plays for preseason for you guys. If you have any other questions about the games as the lines move, we can try to figure it out for you. Please tweet us at the OddsBreakers. Now, let's get into a little fantasy football with our guy, D Nasty. All right, now it's time for a little fantasy football. We have our guy, D Nasty, back to talk a little bit about draft strategy today. Dave, how you been doing, man?
Wonderful. Just completed a couple drafts over the weekend, so just doing a little tuning up for my final drafts here.
Oh my God, yeah. Our two big ones is next week, so I'm excited for that. And a little time left. I did update our rankings on our website, so if anyone wants to check out my rankings, it's at Bets Info Trends tab. Just go to that, and then you'll be able to scroll right down to it. It has the all rankings, the running backs, the wide receivers, quarterback, tight end, defense, and kicker. So, Dave, this is kind of interesting. We only had 3 preseason games, and we just got done with 2 of them. Did you make any changes in your rankings based on news, injuries, or just what you saw during some of the games?
Yes. Some of the rankings, I do have some risers. Packers have looked pretty good. We haven't really saw Aaron Rodgers yet, but with Aaron Rodgers back, you do have to move up some of those guys on the Packers. Randall Cobb, for instance. Devontae is going to be up there already, but I do like how A.J. Dillon is actually playing. He's been looking really good in the preseason while he's been playing while Aaron Jones has been out. So I got A.J. Dillon moved up my draft board here a little bit. Tevin Coleman, actually, he's been running with the number ones, too, for the Jets. He could be the starting running back. He could get a lot of carries there, too, as well. I got him moving up my board a little bit as well. Irv Smith Jr., he's actually looked well, and he's one of my sleepers as well. I got him moved up a little bit. A sleeper that a lot of people probably don't have out there right now, Tyler Kroft for the New York Jets. He could be their starting tight end. Herndon might have lost his job and might be his second-string tight end right now. So he's a kind of a surprise one that you might not have thought of, but he's actually a faller right now. Herndon is a faller, but the Kroft is moving up draft boards. Mike Davis, I'm still not sure about him. I got him moved down a little bit here, too. The other running backs have looked good. Huntley has actually been a surprise for them in preseason. He might actually grab a roster spot and be the backup that we might want to watch, actually. Caleb Huntley might have overtaken Javian Hawkins, so that's someone that we've talked about before is Javian Hawkins, but Huntley actually might be moving up over him. James Conner, actually, I moved him down a little bit. I wasn't very high on him to begin with. I think Chase Edmonds is definitely moving ahead in that running back committee there. He's going to grab more of a share like we were talking about last week.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. I don't know about Tevin Coleman, but I actually moved Michael Carter up a little bit more myself. And I just like what he did. He got a big lion's share of the carries. His yards per carry wasn't too much different, 5.2 average to Tevin Coleman's 4.8. And then Tyler Johnson was sitting there at third. So I see what you're saying. Yeah, Kroft was pretty good, 2 for 2, 36 yards. You just wonder if they just want to keep Herndon healthy, though. So that's interesting. What were you saying about Jadeveon Hawkins?
Jadeveon Hawkins might have lost his job to Caleb Huntley. Caleb Huntley might have overtaken him for the third spot for the Atlanta Falcons now for that running back here, Ricky, there.
You know, I was trying to figure that out, and that's why I wanted you to reiterate that. So Huntley was the better or got more touches, more rushes 6 rushes for 57, but Javion Hawkins got 5 rushes for 46. It wasn't too much under. Funny that they both averaged, 9.5 and 9.2 yards per rush, but then some of the other guys like Foreman and Allison did terrible. So what's interesting to me, it's still a race, but Huntley, I would agree with you, is kind of up there now. So he's competing with Hawkins. So interesting stuff. I had to upgrade Ramondre Stevenson a little bit, David. And, the Patriots is still a mess, but I actually had to downgrade Sonny Michel because of it. He's not looking good at all, and Ramondre Stevenson's looking better than him for the Patriots, right?
I was talking before the season started even that they were going to release Sonny Michel too. So I definitely agree with you on that as well. And Huntley actually had a better first preseason game too as well. I know the last preseason game they were pretty even, but the week before he actually played him as well. So that goes into that my thinking as well.
Oh, for sure. Another one that I liked was Jarrett Patterson for the Washington football team. He seems to be, taking a chunk out of some of the nicer carries, getting some good yards, and maybe Gibson might be in a little trouble there. So 26 carries for 71 yards, almost 5 yards per rush. So I like that too. I thought Jarrett Patterson is, took a lot of the carries just last game. Thought that was very interesting. Wanted to talk about a receiver I moved up was Marvin Jones. He was looking good in Jacksonville. Now, I missed the game tonight because I was too busy. I'm going to rewatch it tomorrow morning. But I'm curious what kind of play he got for Jacksonville. I know he was kind of the leader there, and he's kind of the veteran in Jacksonville. I know there's a few other guys there, but it almost seems like they need that veteran presence to lead them. So I'm interested in him a little bit more. I had to move him up in my draft board just a little bit. Now, he got 5 receptions for 41 yards this game. So about the same as some of the the same as Chanel pretty much. He was 7 targets, 5 targets, so pretty close. Now, my other downgrade, Dave, I hate to say, was Joshua Kelly. He looked pretty bad at 1.3 yards per carry. He had 6 or 7 carries too for the Chargers. So I was expecting more out of him, but I really had to downgrade him.
Yeah, and Larry Roundtree actually might overtake him there too as well. So that's another guy you might want to take. That might be a nice sleeper down the road here coming into the season.
Oh, definitely, for sure. So we're going to check out the Saints and the Jaguars again. But in the meantime, let's talk a little bit about draft strategy. Now, we didn't cover this last year, but I thought it was kind of important here because, some people are talking about, you should go running back heavy at first and then grab some receivers later. And I'm also hearing from people that, if you're drafting 8, 9, or 10, maybe you grab 2 of the best receivers and take shots at running back. So, Dave, I'm going to start by asking you, where do you even draft your first receiver in the beginning?
Okay, that's a good question. Now, you have to think about quarterback too. Normally, you're not going to draft a quarterback until the 3rd or 4th round, but it's all going to depend on a PPR league as well. So in a 1-point PPR league, wide receivers are going to be much more important than a half PPR league, of course, because they're going to score you more points. And I would take a first round wide receiver, but normally you're going to go with your first 5 to 6 running backs first before you start to draft a wide receiver. But in the PPR leagues, you could go as high as a 5th or 6th round pick on a wide receiver possibly after those top tier of running backs are gone, like McCaffrey, Cook, Ezekiel, Barkley, possibly, Kamara, Jones, Henry. So after those guys, definitely wide receivers are definitely going to be in play. Last year, in one of my bigger money leagues, I did take a DeAndre Hopkins did slip down to me at the end of the first round, and I did take him, and he actually helped me win the league. And then I took Kelvin Ridley in the 2nd round. So I actually took 2 wide receivers, which is normally not something I normally do, but that actually helped me win my league that last year with those 2 wide receivers being picked.
Interesting stuff. So, yeah, it's different for me. Even in a half PPR league, I still have some receivers there only because I trust some running backs a little bit less. So a little different between the way we do it. Of course, I have DeAndre Hopkins higher than a lot of people. And I mean, I have him close to Aaron Jones, really. I have it Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, and then I have DeAndre Hopkins because I just have a problem with Derrick Henry in his carries and his non-catching. I mean, a half-point PPR, at least you get some points for that, and that's the one that we always talk about because that's the leagues we're mostly in. And then it goes Jonathan Taylor, Ezekiel Elliott, Devontae Adams is right there, Najee Harris, Nick Chubb, Stephon Diggs. Then my third receiver comes up, right? So, that's what I'm looking at. But to each his own, Dave. Now, if you're drafting 10 or 11, would you think, and let's just say the bulk of the running backs are gone, maybe Najee or Nick Chubb is there, do you take one of them ahead of a receiver?
Yeah, because you have to look at what's going to be going on when you get up to that top of the draft too, as well. So you have to look at where your position is, where you're picking, because that's going to be very important as well. If you're picking number one overall, of course you're going to take one of the top running backs or the top three. But then when you have to think about when it comes back up to you, it's going to go back down and all the way back up. In normal snake drafts, that's how they normally work. So you got to think about what's going to go in those 2 rounds before it gets back to you, and what you really need, and what you think is going to be your strength on your team, and what there's a lot of left in the draft too. So there's a lot of different scenarios you have to look at when drafting that you have to keep an eye on. You have to look at who's went off the board, what teams need, and then what you think is going to go in those next 2 rounds before it comes back to you. If you're on one end of the draft, like first pick, or you have the 12th pick, you have to think about what you have already and what your need is, and what other people are drafting as well. So you might have to reach on maybe a running back or wide receiver if you're short at that position at that time, or if you think that's something that's more of a need and that's already going a lot in draft, it's going running back heavy. Some drafts I've seen it where it's gone 10 running backs the first 7 or 8 picks, or it's going 7 or 8 running backs in the first 10 picks. So you have to go running back just to get one of those good running backs, because it's going to go back up and come back down to you. You're not going to get someone that's going to be a higher caliber guy. Plus, you have to keep in mind, too, there is a lot of rookie wide receivers that can blow up, like a Justin Jefferson last year. You're not going to normally get a star stud running back unless it's like a Najee Harris that's going to come out and be a starter in fantasy for you. There's a lot more wide receivers that you're going to be able to grab off the waiver wire or later in drafts that are actually going to be able to plug and play. A lot of the running back committees these days, you're not going to be able to get a guy that's going to get a majority of the carries these days either.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the big thing. Because I think after Zeke, Najee, Chubb, then I have like the Dobbins, the Saquon Barkleys, the Ecklers, the Clyde Edwards-Hilairs, the Mixons, and then the Antonio Gibsons, the Mike Davis. That's where it gets a little bit more hairy. Just like I was saying earlier, Gibson possibly could lose a lot of his job. Dobbins, gets a lot of running back share. Eckler is not that big, Saquon, possibly injury concerns. And that's kind of when I think if there's still a stud wide receiver out there, for example, like a A.J. Brown, like a Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, right? Calvin Ridley. If those guys are up there and coming around the second round, you might want to grab one of those guys even before one of those running backs, Dave.
Exactly. And we got to look at value, too. Like, I had a draft this past weekend. Antonio Gibson slid to me in the 4th round, so I couldn't pass him up there. That's a value pick right there then. So if you're getting Gibson in the 4th round, you definitely take him there. So it just all depends on how the draft is moving along, too, and who's taking what in the draft as well. So it's about value picks, too. If a guy that's ranked in the first couple rounds and he slides to you in the 3rd or 4th, you definitely have to take him just because he's the best player at that position at that time.
Exactly. Grabbing value, extremely important, especially to sports bettors. Sometimes it's not something you really like, but the value's too high on it not to grab. And that's what happens sometimes when there's a guy that's suspended for the first 2 games, possibly the first 4 games, maybe got a little injured in preseason. There's a point where you need to take him. If you can just skate by and go 2-2 the first 4 games, that guy's going to come back. Obviously, Michael Thomas is somebody to think about now, especially now that Jameis Winston's balling a little bit. Started 9 for 10 today. I looked at the stats when I had a little chance today. So, that's just makes me think a little bit more about Michael Thomas, because he'll be there for your playoffs. most likely, unless he's disgruntled. I know he's somewhat disgruntled, but there's going to be a value time, maybe in the 10th or 11th round, where beautiful Michael Thomas is going to come up, and you're like, man, this guy was like the top receiver the last 2-3 years, or in the top 3. So that's important for value. Let me ask you this strategy, Dave. What if you went, let's just say you're drafting 8, right, in a 12-team league. What if you get like a Jonathan Taylor for 8, and then, you're coming around, I think the next pick would be like number 19 or something, right? 19 or 20. And then you get like a DK Metcalf, okay? Top receiver in Seattle. Do you come back with Patrick Mahomes? It's almost like you got 2 studs, pretty good value. And I think, is that when you come with like, you know what? I'm going to try to get the best quarterback. I got some really good running. And now I can get the best in his position, even though I drafted 8th. What are your thoughts of that?
Actually, it's kind of funny because I did the exact thing in my draft this past weekend. Number 3, I drafted Alvin Kamara. And then on the way back up at number 3 again, it was a 12-team draft. I got Patrick Mahomes with my second-round pick. He slid all the way back up to in the second round to me with the 3rd overall pick. So I got Patrick Mahomes there, and I did take him, actually. I was kind of torn between taking him and a few of the wide receivers that were like a DK Metcalf was still there for me, and a Ridley. It just went right before me, actually, who I wanted to take. I actually had to win with Mahomes, though. But you have to look at if it's a 6 or 4-point quarterback passing league, though, too. In a 6-point TD league for quarterbacks, it's going to be much, much more important to take a guy like that. 4-point PPR, 4-point passing TD leagues, he's not as important. Maybe I wouldn't take a Mahomes there then. I don't think I would have took a Mahomes if it's only a 4-point league. Guys like a Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson are going to be much more important in those leagues because you're going to get 6 points when they rush in those TDs, or even like a Josh Allen. Those quarterbacks that are going to get you those rushing TDs are going to be much more value, and they're going to get you those rushing yards too, which are going to account for more points than another guy would get throwing for 3 TDs or 4 TDs, but he's going to get you those rushing yards, and that's going to be at least a touchdown just in rushing yards, or even a rushing TD, which is going to be even worth more too, because it's going to be 6 points and not 4 points.
100%. I mean, that is a huge point. Look at if you get 6 points for your quarterback touchdowns, that's when you might grab a Mahomes, and if you don't, then you probably wait a little bit and still grab a running back or a receiver, because you can get a Lamar Jackson. Right, you're going to want a Lamar Jackson if you're getting rushing touchdowns for 6 points. Some of the other quarterbacks out there that you're going to be looking at for that situation is a Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray runs the ball a lot. He runs it in. He's not going to – he has trouble seeing over the line, so sometimes he prefers it. You just kind of roll him out, and he'll run it in. Josh Allen runs more than I thought he was going to last year. I think he runs a little bit still this year. Russell Wilson used to, but that's kind of like a false narrative, I think, nowadays, Dave. To be honest with you, I think Russell's just looked at as more of a rusher when he hasn't been the last few years. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think Russell Wilson is more of a passer now, actually. He first couple of years in the league, he definitely rushed more. I think his teams weren't as good then until they had those Super Bowl teams. Even then, I think he rushed even a little bit less, too, because he had a better team around him. Now he's got better receivers as well, in Lockett and DK Metcalf. I don't think he runs as much this year either, maybe even less than last year. I think he just rushes when he needs to, or to get out of trouble, or just to pick up that first down. I don't think at the beginning he's going to be like he was at his beginning of his career when he rushed a lot more. Like you said, I like Kyler Murray a lot too. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts you can get way much later in the draft.
I was going to say him. Yeah, I was going to say Jalen Hurts will definitely move up in a 4-point quarterback league.
And you don't forget too, because most leagues you're going to still get the 1 point for every 10 yards rushing. So if one of those quarterbacks gets you 40, 50 yards on the ground, that's almost just like a touchdown right there. Yeah,
100%. Totally agree with that. Well, Dave, why don't we? I think we did a good job doing that. Well, you know what? Let's look at tight ends real quick. I have Kelsey pretty quick in the early second round. Just curious I'm curious where you have Kelsey, Kittle, Pitts, and Waller. Can you tell me where you have those guys?
Pitts, I went in my draft this past weekend. I took him in the 3rd round, actually, just because Kittle and Kelsey had already went. But actually, my draft strategy, I usually don't take a tight end probably until the second or third round. I mostly usually wait on tight ends to tell you the truth. So unless it's a Kelsey or a Kittle, I can wait on Pitts. You could probably get him in the third or fourth round. Waller, you still don't probably want to go second or third round probably for Waller. He's a little banged up right now though, but he's still gonna be a main target there. It depends on your league though is because some leagues you're still gonna get the 1 point PPR. Kelsey's gonna be definitely a beast. He's gonna get you as many receptions as some wide receivers will. So he's definitely worth a late first, early second round pick for Kelsey, definitely. And a 1 point PPR, even a half PPR, he's still gonna be pretty important. I'd still second round at the latest for Kelsey probably. And then Kittle, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on that. Garoppolo's probably going to start again this year. I think they're still going to go to him quite a bit. I say it's probably second, third round, probably. Kittle, I could see him around third round, probably even maybe.
Yeah, I actually have Kittle in them probably, if it's 12 teams at the end of the second, and then I have Waller pretty early in the third. So that's how I have those guys. Yeah. And then actually I have Pitts in the middle of them. I have like him probably starting the third round, Kyle Pitts. Atlanta looked horrible, but they haven't played any of their starters really. Like none of their main starters. Their defense is getting really eaten up, which makes you know that they're going to be throwing the ball more, right, David?
Oh, definitely, yeah. You know Atlanta's going to be throwing the ball a ton, and their defense is not going to be good, just like last year. They didn't really add any standout players in the offseason. They had some draft picks that they drafted that will probably be plugged in, but they're not going to be ready to play right away, and they're going to get burned too, and they're going to be coming from behind a lot, so they're going to be throwing a ton. So I think Pitts will still get a ton of yards and receptions as well. And Matt Ryan's a good, solid quarterback, and he likes to pass the ball on. He's not very mobile, so he's going to be checking the ball down the field.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Any new sleepers that you thought about before we close it out?
Mac Jones actually is a kind of a deep sleeper for me. He's a guy that's been rising up. I kind of forgot to talk about before as well. He's actually looked really good in the preseason, actually. I'm still not sold on Cam Newton. I think he's kind of done almost. He's more of a rusher, not a passer. And New England's kind of set up as the opposite there. They have the two tight ends now. They got a little bit. They upgraded the wide receiving core a little bit. Mac Jones could possibly be the starter midway through the season, even maybe 3-4 games into the season.
Well, that would be interesting if he does for sure. So can't really disagree with you. And I had him higher than you when we did our rankings, so I was already a little bit higher on him because I don't believe in Cam Newton too much. So who's been moving up a little bit in my draft board is probably Rondale Moore. I like how they're using him in Arizona. They're using they're getting him in space, doing some gadget plays with him. I think they even handed the ball off to him. I think you might see some end around type plays, and some stunts and things with Rondale Moore. So I found that interesting. He's a guy who moved up a little bit. Traquan Smith is high because of the Michael Thomas, but I had to move him up a little bit just based on Jameis Winston is looking to be a starter. So you got to pump him up slightly because of that. And I think I covered the rest of them in the beginning of the show. I think those are my guys and my moves right now. You shouldn't overreact too much for preseason, and just remember last year's a little bit more important than what you see in the preseason, right, Dave?
Exactly, yeah. And I do like Marquise Callaway too in New Orleans. I think he could be one of the main guys there too with Thomas out. So I like him a little bit more than Smith actually, but I do like Smith as well. But I like little Callaway a little bit more than Smith actually.
I moved up Callaway, and I don't know. Yeah, he's actually pretty high. He's number 62 receiver for me, so that's not that bad. He's right. He's around the Jalen Ragars and the Nelson Aguilars for me. That's how high I moved him up. So we'll see. He's not that far from some of the other guys. Interesting call on that.
And the two receivers you got to remember too that are still injured. Rashad Bateman's probably going to miss the beginning of the year, at least the first 2 to 3 weeks of the year. So you got to downgrade him on your draft boards. Elijah Moore is still dealing with that injury as well too. So definitely keep an eye on those two. Bateman probably is not even draftable now, even possibly. So he was moving up a lot of draft boards before, but I would say he's probably moving down draft boards now that he probably won't even play the first couple weeks. They're saying possibly.
Yeah, he's going to be like the very last couple guys you might even draft. If that just depends upon how many bench spots you have, right?
Exactly.
I mean, our league, the one I run, has more bench spots than normal. I think what's the normal? 15 total. We're like 18, aren't we?
Yeah, and then you have to keep in mind, too, to use that IR spot if you got it. If there's a guy like a Michael Thomas that you can hide on your IR, definitely take full advantage of that. Draft him, throw it on your IR, and then you can pick up another player that you can use during the year until he's healthy.
All right, sounds good, David. Did we miss anything? Anything else you need to cover?
Not at this time. Always draft a running back and kicker last. Don't ever put any stock into them earlier than the last 2 picks.
A defense or kicker? You said running back.
I'm a defense kicker. My apologies.
Yeah, definitely draft them last. A lot of times I play defense by rotation, meaning I'll just pick up the people off the bench. First of all, there's going to be a defense that comes off the bench that is amazing, and then you might want to keep them, like Washington last year. Nobody drafted Washington last year, but then when Chase Young started balling and Ron Rivera really put his foot down, they were no longer not even just a non-drafted, defense. They were a top 3 or 4 defense. So you might get lucky and find that. That's why it's so important. And then defense by rotation, like whoever plays Jacksonville, whoever plays Houston, whoever plays, bad teams that don't score. Even the way the Bears are looking right now, think about that. I play by rotation a lot, Dave.
Yeah, matchups. Matchups are really key. So, yeah, you definitely look at your matchups each week and then see who the defense is playing. And then you can definitely find defenses each week according to matchups.
All right, sounds good, Dave. Well, thanks so much for coming on and talking a little fantasy football. We're going to be off next week for Labor Day, at least the fantasy portion is. And then we're going to come right back in as soon as NFL Week 1 ends the week after and get right into our normal show with our waiver wire pickups, our injuries, and our D-Nasty sleepers, my man. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, Dave.
Thank you.
All right, my friends, that was D-Nasty. Please tweet us if you have any more fantasy questions at the OddsBreakers. Everyone, have a great rest of your week and go get some winners.